Is that the motion be agreed to?
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am pleased to follow the Minister and acknowledge many of the things that she has said. Firstly, the thousands of people who will around the country be very pleased to see the passage of this bill. It's not only large in size, a bit like an elephant, its gestation period is about the same length, and the 10 years, I guess, since this was conceived in terms of the need to bring together all the pieces of legislation and to have some alignment for a country that relies still for its wealth on the production of food. And so ensuring that everyone involved in every part of the supply chain knows what they have to do, and that's produce, process, distribute, handle, sell safe food. That is what this country still depends upon. And in spite of all our efforts to broaden the base of our economy, primary production and the production of food and fibre still drive our wealth creation for the most part. Mr. Speaker, the Minister points out the reality that this is a risk-based system that we're relying on. And we are supporting the legislation. But we're also cautious because it was in 1992 that a risk-based system was introduced for health and safety. And without proper monitoring, without proper resourcing and policing of this, we could very well end up with some major mistakes, mistakes that we as a country cannot afford to make. We've seen a few mistakes lately in the food safety area. They have cost us literally hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of our international reputation, the efforts to get back into the market, and still the dairy industry is floundering in some areas, particularly in the area of infant formula, after what was an unfortunate botch-up, to pardon the pun, Mr. Speaker. So we support a risk-based regime on the basis that oversight, that monitoring, and where necessary penalties are fairly and appropriately implemented. And there were a number of issues as we worked through the bill and then the SOP, issues like recall powers, around the powers of entry, all of those things around what we deem to be low risk and high risk. That is, sausage sizzles were not deemed to be high risk, Mr. Speaker. The select committees, twice of course, teased through these issues, and I think we did our very best to reach the right balance and ensure that we have a healthy system of producing food, but one that doesn't cripple the good old Kiwi ways of a sausage sizzle, exchanging food and getting on and helping one's neighbour as we should do. The issue of country of origin labelling raised by the Minister herself has been a debatable point at the end of the bill here. I introduced a supplementary order paper to actually not do anything more than our Tasman neighbours, but actually to do the same as them. And the Minister points to an inquiry taking place in Australia. And she implies that it's to discredit the regime that they have in Australia. There will always be the need for ongoing reviews and improvements. That doesn't mean to say there's no value in country of origin labelling. And Australia's committed to it. We should be committed to it under the ANSFA agreement, but we have an exception. We applied for an exception not to have country of origin labelling. And for a country that depends upon the ongoing process of safe and fine foods for the world's most discerning customers, the question is, why wouldn't we have country of origin labelling? We impose, and this bill continues with that, quite tight restrictions on people producing food to make sure it can't be contaminated, that it's free of any unwanted pests, diseases, organisms, or anything that might affect people's health. And in doing so, we impose a cost on those producers. The very least we can do is to give them the pride to brand their product of New Zealand, so that they can expect and rightfully get a premium for that product. That's why we believe country of origin labelling is part of a smart branding strategy for New Zealand's products that should go to the most discerning customers in the world who are able to pay the premium that we need to keep our farmers and our producers viable. Because it's not easy. Around the world, primary producers are either peasants or they're highly subsidised. In New Zealand, they are not. And for the good farmers and horticulturalists and viticulturalists in this country to make a decent return on their investments and their efforts, they need to know that their efforts will be acknowledged, not by some big supermarket chain that dictates where their products are sold, by customers who demand, who want New Zealand produce because it's safe and of high quality. So, Mr. Speaker, we have missed an opportunity, and Labor commits, when we get to government on September the 21st, that we will set about to introduce country of origin labelling to be alongside our Australian partners and to not give them an upper hand as we go to the world market selling very similar produce in some ways, theirs marked product of Australia, ours not necessarily marked product of New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, there were a number of issues and I'll just touch on them briefly, I guess, that were in the bill, and while not wanting to relitigate them all, I think it was important to know that we, as a committee, went through most areas of concern. There was one issue with the purpose of the bill. Even at the latter stages, we sat down and said that what we're trying to do with the bill here is actually, quote, to maintain New Zealand's reputation as a producer and exporter of safe and suitable food. And that wasn't one of the objects of the original bill. But time has moved on in 10 years in this area, and in terms of retail supply and control through the world, the dynamics have changed. Supermarkets do have more power, and it's harder for producers, even though they are from New Zealand with our good reputation, to get out there and leverage a fair position. So we figured that, and I guess committed to putting up front the object of this new piece of legislation to endorse the production of food from the country. We put also in that the Minister and Chief Executive must give the greatest priority to that of food safety and the protection of public health. Very, very important for this legislation, not just about selling good food, that we are concerned about public health as well. There were issues, for example, of the clearance of imported food, the concerns we still have around biosecurity and how the current system deals with food. Pork, of course, is the most topical one. We're importing almost half of the pork we consume into this country with biosecurity risks. How should those risks be addressed, and how does that affect the producers in this country, Mr. Speaker? As I said, I spoke of the power to search, concerns around civil rights issues there, and I don't think any one of the officials want to charge in on any individual unfairly, but it is necessary, should we consider there to be a major food scare, that we have the right to recall and to take action on that, Mr. Speaker. The sale of food by small producers, I've talked about that previously. We need to ensure that small producers, who often are at the front edge of innovation, that they are able to get out there and sell their food in the domestic market, trial their products, and then maybe build to a point where they can become major exporters. So, Mr. Speaker, Labor supports this bill. We welcome its passage finally after 10 years through the House. It did take the National Government a while to get into gear on this, but it has provided an opportunity to go back and scrutinise the bill once again, address issues of recall powers that were raised from the botulism issue, Mr. Speaker, to improve the bill, pass it through this House, but to finally, Mr. Speaker, warn Parliament that this bill, without proper oversight, scrutiny and resources, could fail us just as the OSH legislation did. We cannot afford that to happen. We support the food bill, Mr Speaker, to support the producers, to support this country.
I call Shane Arden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I rise in support of the food bill as well. Mr Speaker, the member that's just resigned